Well, this afternoon I want to talk about designing education beyond borders. Before I do that, I want us to think about design. We don't normally think about education in terms of design. Education is something that we take for granted. But I often wonder why, when my child is 5 years old, I'm legally obliged to hand that child over to the state apparatus. So let's think about design. And to start off with, I thought I'd go to the Design Council website. And if you will, try to memorize a few bits of these because we'll be referring to them later in my talk. Design is what links creativity and innovation. It shapes ideas to become practical, attractive propositions for users and customers. Design may be described as creativity deployed to a specific end. So let's think about users and customers and who they may be in the context of education. And let's think about what the specific end might be when we think about education. And when we think about those and look at the classroom, we realize that not much has changed during the past 100 years. The photograph at the top is from 1900, and the one at the bottom is from this year. In fact, they've changed so little. In fact, they've become very similar, some people think, to other institutions, such as prisons, and the behavior that we expect. In fact, some have gone as far as to say that there is a school-to-prison pipeline. But I'll let you be the judge of that. I think it's an interesting, you could compare this actually to a number of different institutions that we have across the world, not just prisons, but I think this is the most controversial one. So perhaps it's time to think again, to redesign. If we were designing our education systems from the beginning, what would we do? And we're going to play a bit of a game here, and please feel free to either shout out ideas or just tweet them. And I was thinking about designers and people that have disrupted, organizations that have disrupted the society that we live in during my lifetime. And I thought about these guys, Johnny Ives, Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs. And I wondered, if they designed a classroom, would it be a room? Now, the humorists amongst you might think, well, no, it would be a school that has very specific diets, like only fruit on Tuesdays and something like that. Or it would be a totalitarian regime where you could only have the content and the media that they prescribed. But that wasn't what I was thinking about. I was thinking about what happened with the iPhone, and not as an Apple fanboy, but thinking from the fact that the iPhone changed the way the world thought about mobile communicators and changed the cartel of the mobile phone industry forever. But if you don't like the Apple one, how about these boys? Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the founders of Google. Now, if they designed a classroom, would it be a room? Would it track your every move? Would it offer up new things to learn or new things to buy? Feel free to join in. And what if Mark Zuckerberg designed a classroom? Well, you certainly wouldn't have any privacy. But you'd be sharing it in a social context. What about these guys? Donald Trump, Alan Sugar. Apart from Donald telling you how to apply suntan lotion, maybe they'd be having special classes and teaching you how to stab your colleagues in the back in a race for the boardroom. Or these guys, probably less familiar with these guys, Terry Gu, the chief executive of Foxconn, and Henry Ford. How would they design a classroom? What would that be like? Well, presumably it'd be definitely 18-hour days, where you can earn just enough to save so you can buy the product you're making. And what about these guys? A couple of likely lads there, I feel. Our Prime Minister, bless him, and Michael Gove, for it is he. And I think we know how this story ends up with this recent story in The Guardian, how they've banned curved walls and any kind of architectural enhancements that improve the environment for learning. Well, heck, I say, why stop there? Why don't we just get rid of the windows? Because after all, looking out the window and having ideas is a distraction. It comes down to the purpose of education. What is the purpose of education? We don't ask that question very often, do we, when we hand our child over to the state? Is it, as Noam Chomsky recently pointed out at a speech he gave in London recently, about enlightenment, following a personal line of inquiry, what you're interested in, discovery? Or is it indoctrination? Is it in the way that Marx or Gramsci, Bordeaux suggested, that education is just another superstructure, like religion, or politics, or mass media, or the judicial system, designed to maintain and reinforce the status quo? Or produce the productive forces of society? Now, as Danny Boyle, we recall those who saw the opening ceremony of the Olympics, this Britain, the green and pleasant land where we all lived under the windmill and the feudal lord, that was quickly turned over in 1750 to the industrial capitalist after the steam engine, this big change in our society. So suddenly, those who worked in the farm, we had to have an education system which taught them how to work in the factory. And we're seeing this in China. We've seen this in China, where people were working for $5 a day in the fields and have now moved for $17 a day to the factory, so that their children won't need to work in the factory. And now China has a problem. The 90s generation, the children of those factory workers, don't want to work in the factory. They want to design the iPad, not make it. Or could it be something else? Now, changing tack just slightly, because I was told this was supposed to be a feel-good presentation. Well, it's not. So, passports. Why do we have passports? What are we worried about? Well, I think we have passports so we can have poor people. So I have someone to make my shoes, my underpants where I don't know where they came from, my iPad. Education is another passport, isn't it? It's a passport. It's a passport how you can to come into the UK. You can come and be welcomed into the UK by this government if you have particularly high educational attainment. I was told that by the Prime Minister himself. True story. You can also come here if you put £500,000 down on the table. Life's always been like that. But what I'm talking about is this. Now, 70 million children in the continent of Africa don't have access to primary education. Now, that was a headline that came out quite recently, but this is a headline that I've known and seen in the 25 years that I've been attending global summits about how we transform education. And like all good things typically run by NGOs, it means anything but transforming education. I suspect the reason we have 70 million children in the continent of Africa without access to education is because that's the way we like it. Because that way, we have access to their resources. Give an example of that. Some of my family are from Ghana. 6, 7 years ago, they discovered oil off the coast of Axim and inland. Ghana didn't have the capability to mine and extract its own oil. But guess who did? We did. So now, after all the celebrations they had in Ghana, after all those celebrations, they get 5% on every barrel, and the gas prices are going up at the pump. Is it a conspiracy? Who knows? But education is a passport, in my opinion. And just to paraphrase my own organization, my organization is called Learning Without Frontiers. Well, here's an example of learning without foreigners. What is going to happen to these people? What are we worried about? So, maybe lighten the mood a little, huh? In my opinion, education, like democracy, should be a right and not a privilege. And yet we see it as a privilege. It is a passport that you need to win in order to get access, to improve, to get out. Education has been used as a way of subjugating entire continents, in my opinion. On that point, I wonder if these young people here designed a classroom, would it be a room? And if these children designed a classroom, would it be a room? I suspect this would be a place where these children play, collaborate, share equitably. But that isn't mirrored in the world that we have today within education. And we, as a species, face huge, phenomenal, formidable challenges ahead. When I was born, there were less than 3 billion people on this planet. There's now over 7 billion people, and we don't have enough water, food, and energy to go around. So we do not have an equitable sharing of resources. So we have passports, we subjugate, we have lack of access to education. And yet, we need to solve these bigger challenges ahead. And that's why education is crucial, because we don't know which one of those children has the key for our survival. So, a question for you, and please feel free to tweet your answers. If you designed a classroom, would it be a room? If you created a new education system, what would it be like? I thank you for listening.